We at the Club of Budapest are trying to be concerned about the way humanity behaves on this planet. It's unsustainable, and it's all something to do with our mind, with our consciousness. And you are one of the foremost experts, if not the foremost expert, in the biology of how we think, the biology of belief, as your book says. So how can we move people's beliefs in such a way that they become people who become oneness, who become one with each other and one with nature, who can reconnect and lose and recover the connection that we have lost? This is a great contribution to the Club of Budapest work. If you can exchange with you a few words about this fantastic challenge, change people's minds so that the world could also change. How can we do that?
Ervin, I'm so honored to be with you, and I want to thank you for including me in your discussions, because there are answers. There are things we can do from a level of science. One of the most important parts of science, most people have no idea, is quantum physics. And people used to say quantum physics is weird science, but they didn't understand. And quantum physics today is the most valid science on the planet. There is no science with more truth than quantum physics. And I emphasize that because the first principle in quantum physics is consciousness is creating our life experiences. That our energy of our mind is shaping the world in which we live. And this then becomes important because it says that we are not just victims of a world, we are creating a world. But if people have no idea that their thoughts are creating, then they don't realize if they're thinking a positive thought or a negative thought, that these are making big differences in the world. So the first thing is this: quantum physics says consciousness coming from our mind is what is creating the world. Now, when you say the mind, this is where a problem comes. Because they say the mind, oh, is it that one, like there's a one mind? I go, no, there are two separate parts to the mind, and they work together. They're interdependent. And I say the two parts of the minds have different functions, and most importantly, they learn in different ways. So I talk about first the most recent evolution of the mind is right behind our forehead. There's a lobe of brain tissue, and this part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex. This is where the consciousness comes from. This is where we are each different independent people. The prefrontal cortex is where our spirituality comes into our biology. So this is you, and it's unique. And the other part of the mind is called the subconscious. Well, the subconscious has a whole different function. The subconscious is the equivalent of a hard drive in a computer. That's where the programs go in. So the conscious mind is creative, but the subconscious mind is programs or habits. We call it the habitual mind, the one where habits come from. So now I say we have two different functions. I go, yeah, the conscious mind is creative. And this is what separates humans from all the other organisms on the planet, because we have imagination. And if you have imagination, then you can use that to be creative. For example, imagination for 1,000 years, we would love to go to the moon. But I said, at some point, that imagination was turned into creative action, science, and we went to the moon. What we can imagine, we can create. And why I'm so happy to be with you, because your imagination is a world of wholeness and peace and community and cooperation. And I really want to support that, because we can create that world. But to understand that, then we have to go back and say, then how come, if the quantum physics says we're all creating our planet, we're all creating our life, then I say, then I talk to the audience, I say, how's that working for you? Are you creating the most wonderful life, a heaven and happiness and joy and love? And most people, no. I said, but you're the creator. I said, where's the problem? And here's where the problem comes from. Yes, the conscious mind has all the great wishes and desires and what we want in our life. And the conscious mind also thinks. And you say, so what's the difference? I say, when we're not thinking, the conscious mind is looking out at the world. Imagine your body is a vehicle, and your conscious mind is looking through the windshield and saying, I want to go here, I want to do this, and this is what I want. I go, yeah, those are the wishes and desires. But I also say that the conscious mind can think. People say, so? I said, when you're thinking, you're not looking out at the world. When you're thinking, you're looking inside for an answer. Thoughts are on the inside. They're not written out here. So when we are not thinking, we're looking out the window and driving our biological vehicle to where we want to go, wishes and desires. But the moment we are thinking, we're no longer looking out the windshield. I said, where are we looking? I said, we're looking inside. I said, well, who's going to drive the vehicle? And I go, the subconscious is autopilot, meaning the subconscious has the programs by which we live. You learn how to walk, that's a program. You learn how to talk, that's a program. And these are programs like in a computer. They're in the so-called hard drive, or in this case, subconscious. So the story comes out that science says we're only conscious about 5% of the time. And that means we're only being creative 5% of the time. I said, well, what's happening to the rest? 95%. I go, our life is now controlled by the programs that we have, because that's the autopilot that takes over. Now comes the most important question. What are the programs? Where did we get programs from? Well, a child under 7 years of age, the brain of that child is in a lower vibration state. I said, what vibration? I go, yes, you put wires on a person's head and we can read brain activity. It's called electroencephalograph, EEG. I could read the brain activity. An adult has all levels of brain activity, different vibrations. But a child doesn't have the full vibrations until they start to develop over time. So the first vibration that a child has when they're born is called delta. I said, what is delta? I said, it's the lowest vibration, but it's the vibration of sleep. So I say the brain is not really working, it's like just idle. It's just running but not creative. But comes the next most important part. From below 2, from 1.5, let's say, to age 7, the primary vibration of the child's brain is called theta. Theta is recognized as imagination, and this is where children can mix the real world and the imaginary world, the fantasy world and the real world. They put it together and they can live in that world. In my lectures, I always talk about the tea party, because so many kids have the tea party. I said, what's the tea party for a child in theta? Well, they pour nothing into the cup, and then they drink nothing, but then they say, oh, that was the best tea I ever had. I say, that's where the imagination comes into play, that they thought they were drinking real tea, and they loved it, and I said, but that wasn't real, it was imagination. That's a character of theta. After theta, from 7 on, then we enter actually into consciousness. So the child before 7 is not exercising consciousness, awareness of that level. And so the first level of consciousness after 7 is called alpha, which is calm consciousness. But by age 12, the child ramps up to a higher vibration called beta. That's the study consciousness. That's the schoolroom consciousness. That's what we're ready to be able to use very complex ideas and work. So beta is the highest vibration at this point. Okay, I have to say this because people will understand there's even one higher. It's called gamma. And gamma is what we say in the world is peak performance. When you need the fullest consciousness focus, you can go into gamma, which is a higher vibration than beta. But now I want to go back and I say, but consciousness started at 7. So I said, well, what was before 7? I said, theta. I said, imagination. Yeah, but theta is hypnosis. That is the brain state when a person is in a state of hypnosis. And I say, the first 7 years this child is in hypnosis. I say, why? Because if we just sit down, you and I, Ervin, we say, how many rules do we have to know to become a member of a family, you know? And how many rules do we have to know to be a member of the community? Well, there are thousands of rules. I say, look, how a father talks to their own child is not how the father talks to the neighbor's child. It's not how the father talks to the mother. It's not how the father talks to the neighbor's wife. It's not how the father talks to the policeman. And already I said, my goodness, you already have to have 5 different ways of talking. And I go, that's just the tip of an iceberg of thousands of rules. An infant has to become part of the family and part of the community. And I say, but an infant can't go to school, can't read the book, can't sit in a classroom. I say, so how is an infant going to learn? And I say, nature created the first 7 years as a state of hypnosis. So the child learns in the first 7 years just simply by observing the parents and the family and the community, observing their behavior, and like a video recorder, it's downloaded into the subconscious, which is like the hard drive in a computer. And you need these programs before you can use the computer. In the old days, you would buy a computer, it didn't have a program, and you could push start, and we say it boots up, the screen lights up, and I say, well, do something, and you go, can't do anything until I first put the program in. I go, this is exactly the same as the brain. And the programs start coming in from just after birth, really, and actually, in fact, we now know that the programming actually begins before the child is born, because it's getting information from the mother through the blood, because the mother's blood is nourishing the fetus. Well, yes, blood has nourishment, and this is what helps the fetus grow, but blood has signals, information. The mother's emotions are chemical signals, the mother's hormones are signals, and whatever the mother is experiencing, those signals also go to the fetus. So if there's a pattern of behavior, meaning a behavior that repeats itself, the baby, even before it's born, will learn what the pattern is. For example, some parents play music through the abdominal wall. They put the speaker or the radio near the mother's belly, and if they play the music and it's the same music, they play like the same music over and over again. When the baby is born, they play that music and the baby will like immediately understand that's the music that it learned. If the father is talking and the father talks to the fetus in the mother's belly, what happens is when the baby is born, it will immediately know which one the father is from the voice. So the baby is already learning before it's born. But the next 7 years, it learns by observing the world outside. And here's a very serious issue. Yes, it's downloading behavior by observing parents and family and community, but remember, consciousness didn't begin until age 7. So whatever was downloaded in the first 7 years, the child had no filter to say, this is a good program, this is a bad program. Everything got downloaded. And when everything got downloaded, that means good behaviors were downloaded, bad behaviors were downloaded. So now these are, I say, what are these? These are now programs in the subconscious. And I go, so what? I said, the conscious, when it's running, is controlling 5% of our creative life. But 95% of our life is coming from the subconscious. And I go, what does that mean? I say, the subconscious got the programs, but not from us. Our programs came from other people. So when we are operating from the subconscious, we're not creating the life we want. We're creating the life the program gave us. Now this is where the whole thing goes wrong, because parents don't know that the words they say and what they're showing their own child as the child is watching them. The parents don't know if they're using a behavior that's not very helpful, if they make arguments with the partner or they do things that are not very healthy. The child is observing everything, the good and the bad. And then, as we mentioned, in the regular life, as that child grows up, only 5% of the activity is coming from the creative mind. 95% is coming from the programs that they got. In my lectures, I show pictures of, I gave a lecture in Tel Aviv, and we talked about the fact that the Arabs and the Israelis have been fighting each other for a couple of 100 years, really, and I explained to an audience, it was wonderful, it was mixed Palestinians and Israelis in the same audience, and I explained how children are programmed in the 7 years. And they were very aware, I told them, and they understood, yes, a child is programmed. Then I show them a picture on the screen, and I show them Israeli kids, young kids playing with machine guns. And I showed a picture of Palestinian kids actually dressed up in military uniforms with guns. And I go, you are programming. These kids are being programmed by what you just did. I say, are you programming peace? I say, no, you're programming anger, aggression, violence. And it's interesting because maybe these Israeli kids never even met a Palestinian, but from the training, the programming, if they ever meet a Palestinian, they already have a negative outlook. They already don't like them. They never even said a word to them. But oh, Palestinian, we don't like Palestinians. So you never even met one. And yet the child will be very aggressive toward this Palestinian. Why? Because that was a program, and that's what the military was trying, playing with military stuff and pretending you're military, is programming a child to be a violent warrior. And I go, okay, I show them this, and it was interesting because for the first moment, both the Israelis and the Palestinians in the audience all of a sudden said, oh, they saw what they were doing. And then I said, let me show you a picture of what the future could be like. And I show a picture of an Israeli boy and a Palestinian boy walking armed around each shoulder down the street, enjoying themselves. I show a picture of a Palestinian girl and an Israeli girl being friends with each other. And I said, if children grew up with a program of being friends, they would never fight each other. And I said, where's the war coming from? I said, parents are putting programs into a child's mind under 7 that creates this dysfunction in our human behavior. I said, parents don't know that when they're talking to a child that's that young, child is recording everything they're saying. So I said, where do the problems come from in this world? I say they start in the womb. When the mother is not a happy person or the mother feels unsafe, then the chemistry of stress is going into the child, and that changes the genetics. This is, of course, the new science called epigenetics. We used to think when I was teaching in a medical school, we would teach, for a mother to be a good mother, she just has to nourish the baby with her nourishment passing to the child, and that was all we talked about. But now, because of the new science epigenetics, we say, but the mother is also not just sending nutrition in the blood to the fetus, she's sending the regulation chemicals of her body, her emotional chemicals, her hormones, and these other characters are also going into the fetus. I say, you're changing the genetics of your child because it's called epigenetics. Earlier, without epigenetics, we would just say, oh, the mother just has to nourish the baby because the genes are going to control the baby. That was the old belief, genetics. But now we know epigenetics, which means epi means above, so above the genes. We know the environment is controlling the genetics. So the mother, without even realizing it, is a genetic engineer. She's changing the genetic activity of her child through her consciousness. And then I say, but the father is a big part of the issue, because if the father is not supporting the mother, then the mother is not in a good place, and then the fetus is not in a good place. So I say, parents are genetic engineers and they don't know it. And they can take a healthy, intelligent child and turn it into a fighter, a warrior, just by changing the genetics of the baby as it's developing. So the biggest issue that we need to make the future better in this world is to give parents this awareness. you're programming this child. And if you don't give the child full support, you don't give it, the kind of talking to the child with full love and full energy and saying, I always joke, I said, the best parent, you're the smartest child, you can do anything, you are so wonderful, you're so intelligent, you're so this. I say very positive things. I say, why? Because the child is downloading that into the program. And I say, so what? I say, yeah, but that's the program that's going to run 95% of the day. But if you program a child and try to make it do better by yelling at it and saying things, that's not good enough, who do you think you are? Trying to get the child to make a response to make them more active and better. I say, if you're saying that to a child under 7, they don't understand what you're talking about. They're not even conscious, but they are recording. And everything you said to that child now is part of a program. Not good enough, not smart enough, not deserving, not lovable. I say, when you say those things, you don't mean it for their whole life. You just mean it right now because you're upset. But I say, but the child that has no consciousness of it, the child just recording, I'm not lovable, I'm not deserving. I say, then 95% of that child's life is coming from that program. Then I go back and said, and this is the issue where you and I are in such support of, I said, what if we put the programs in that every one of us is a piece of God? What if every one of us was related by being humans to every one of us? We're all family, we're all humans, we're all part of the same system. And I go, if we were giving that, then children will look at other children as friends and partners and work together and work in harmony. But no, we separate them and say, well, these people we don't like, or these people we don't like. And I go, if a child is under 7, they'll program that, but they've never even met these people. But they have a program. If I ever do meet these people, I'm not going to like them. I go, this is the root problem of our culture today, because we're not giving children empowerment. We're taking away power, not good enough, not smart enough, not deserving. I say, you're taking a child's power away. I say, we want to have peace, then we have to have everybody have power to create. And we're going to create from the program, because quantum physics says your conscious is going to create this life. I said, well, if I have all these negative programs and I'm going to create my life from these negative programs, it's not going to be a great life. So the idea is parents are programming the children and how their whole life will be. As I say in my lectures, the Jesuits have told people, their followers for 400 years, exactly what I just said. Give me the child until it is 7 and I will show you the man. That's a famous saying. I said, what does it mean? Well, I just said a child is programmed for 7 years, and that 95% of the life of that child is the program. So they told people, but people didn't understand. My last thing I need to add, because I think it's as critical as anything else, because in my own development, I did not come from a spiritual background. I came from a scientific background. And in science, we never talk about spirituality. That's outside the science. We never talk about it. But when you understand the nature of quantum physics, that everything is energy, then we have to recognize we are energy. We are energy people. We're not physical people. We're energy people. And we're affected by the energy. And that each of us is receiving a unique energy signal like a television. We're receiving a different broadcast. No two people are receiving the same information. And this is biological. Because on your cells, you have these, what are called receptors. The name in science is called self-receptors, which is interesting because I say, these are antennas. I say, what do you think they're doing? They're receiving a signal called self. No two people have these same antennas. And this is why we can't exchange cells with each other, because if I put my cells with my antennas into your body, your immune system says, these cells aren't us, these are somebody else. And your immune system will eliminate them. So each of us is unique. But I say each of us is getting an environmental signal and you can call it in physics, the science term called field. But if you look at the definition of field, it's the same definition as spirit. So I said, well, they're the same terms. You could say field if you want to be scientific, or you could say spirit if you want to be a spiritualist. And I said, if people understood the spirituality, they'll recognize one of the most important things that I had learned when I understood this, and that is, I cannot die. So what do you mean? I said, I'm the signal, I'm not the body. The bodies can come and go, but the signals are always here. And the signals, field, in our conversation right now, spirit, is we are the broadcast. And we want to say, no, we're the body. I say, no, that's like a television set. And we're playing the broadcast. I am here with Ervin and his television set, but he's not in here. He's like the television set. Their antennas, called self-receptors, are picking up Ervin's broadcast. I'm the Bruce television set, and I'm picking up my broadcast. The most important thing about this is, A, you can't die because you're not even in here. This is a television. We say the television breaks. We say the television is dead. I say, but the broadcast is still there. I go, yes, that's us. We're the broadcast. And it also becomes very important because it says we are part of an energy broadcast of humans, which is part of a field that we would collectively say is God. God is all of the broadcast. Each of us is a piece of the broadcast. We don't get the whole broadcast, we get our little station out of it. But our station came from the broadcast collectively referred to as God. I say, why is this important? Because you can never be separated from God. Never. People think, oh, I've lost favor with God and I will go to hell or someplace. And I said, that's made up story. You can't. You are always connected to God. You don't need somebody to come between you and God and say, I will help you talk to God. I said, you want to talk to God? Talk to yourself. Because you and I and all of us are a piece of God. And we understand that, then you have to recognize everybody else is a piece of God. And if everybody else is a piece of God, then how can you have anger or violence against somebody else because they're also a piece of God? You can own, I'm a piece of God, but you have to recognize so is everybody else. And those are my stories, Ervin, but I know these stories fit totally into what you've been telling the world for all these years. So now I'll step back for a second and say, okay, Ervin, tell me the story.
You told already the story, and it's a perfect good story. And it's something we have to learn. You started with quantum physics and you end up by God. The two hold together. This world is not a random collection of little items moving around according to mechanical laws. Quantum physics, among other things, also tells us all things are connected.
Yes.
All things are moving together in such a way that what happens to one also happens to the other, and nothing disappears. Energy, even more, information, because you're talking about signals, you're talking about broadcast. On the basis of this is information. So what you create in this world is add to the information store of the universe, as it were. And what you take back is that informed universe from you. You create the part of the reality which creates you. So this is a lesson we have to learn. There is something in this field, which we can call God, call spirituality, or call it a field. I call it a field, but I am willing to go further with that. This field has all the information we need to live and to prosper, to thrive, because nature runs on information. Healthy nature runs on good information, on information that makes it possible to live. It's only the human mind, in its later development, is capable of making errors, of disregarding the basic information, the basic programs, which means live together, cooperate, together create a larger whole. Our body is a whole made up of parts. Our society is a whole made up of individuals. Every society has elements that belong to all the other elements. And we cannot separate them, so that this is just this and that we put against that one. That's the wrong program. The big hope, I think, that we pursue when we're looking for this upshift, a better world. The program is to show how we belong together, how together we can create a world that is healthy and whole. It's very interesting, there are several languages. We are now talking from Hungary, and in Hungarian, for example, the word for healthy, egészség, means wholeness. Wholeness is health. And in other languages, there's similar rules as well, similar roots as well. So we need to recover the original program which is in us. It is just been overlaid by all these superficial wrong programs being coded into us after the first 7 years. But in us is already the program for living, the program for evolution, the program for creating a world. Because our brain is not the creator of information, it's the transmitter.
Yes.
So if we can learn to tune our brain to transmit the healthy information, the wholeness of the world, we can create wholeness on this planet as well. All these things that you are teaching us are essential because they show us we are not what we think we are. We are not the superficial programs of behavior. We are deep down, we are one part of a whole, of a larger system, which is based on energy and based on information. That's also quantum physics, and it's also spirituality. That's the new science, the new spirituality of wholeness, of oneness, and let me just add also of love.
Yes.
Because all elements, when they work together, they experience something that in the human mind expresses love. So this is a great lesson, I think, for us to contemplate together. We upshift by becoming whole, by loving. All the great scientists like yourself come up with this final insight. We finally belong, ultimately we are one, we belong together, and we can perfect we can consummate this initial, intrinsic sense of oneness by unconditional love for us, first of all for ourselves, then for others, because we can love together if we love ourselves. You have said that yourself, and it's very true. So let me just end at this point and say, Bruce Lipton, one of the great scientists of our time, I thank you for having come to this conversation. We learned a lot, and we should pursue trying to get this teaching in as part of our effort to shift up on this planet toward a better world.
I thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. And I thank you for what you have been helping the world with all these years. Even though the world is still slow in learning, the only way we're going to survive is when the information you have been providing becomes part of our education and our awareness, and our children learn this so they grow up to be part of the garden, because we came from a garden. And it's interesting because a garden is not a battleground. A garden is the height of cooperation, and we have turned it into a battleground. We're destroying the garden. Human behavior is causing our own extinction at this point, and the only way out of this extinction is not to change the world, but to change us, because we are this problem. And
make the world a garden again.
That's what garden. But that's what I'm looking for, and it's wonderful because when you find a community that of love. And I didn't know this for half of my life, but because my own programming didn't really help me get there. I got programmed to be a scientist because I grew up in a family where education was the most important thing. Not relationship, but education. And so, I got to be a scientist, but I had no understanding of the relationship and the harmony that would come from something called love, because I didn't experience that in my programming period. But now that I've seen it, I want to go out and tell everybody just like you. I want to stand up and tell people we are powerful creators. It's your program that has taken you off the track. And it's very interesting because I just want to add one last thing, because we live in a world based on competition. And this is part of actually Charles Darwin, and before him another philosopher, Thomas Malthus, that said life is a struggle. And so you summarize Darwin theory as a competition in the struggle for life. You know what's interesting? The word competition we use today is winner-loser. Competition, winner-loser.
Zero-sum.
Yeah, but the original term of competition was to strive together, saying that to come together and compete, not to kill the other one, but to make the other one more powerful. So if I was a tennis player, if I played people who are weaker than me, I'm not going to learn anything. I have to be in competition with a player who's better than me so that my game gets better. So it wasn't that I played a tennis game to win or to lose. I played the tennis game to be a better tennis player. I was striving to be better with the competition, not to be a winner or loser. That was not the destination. And if we would then work together with the old version of competition, not the current one, then that means we would all strive to become better at being human, better at being part of the garden that we just talked about. And this really, of course, the underlying theme is in today's word, cooperation. And if people understood, evolution is not driven by our version of competition, winner or loser, but our evolution is cooperation. That means then we have to cooperate with each other, and we have to cooperate with nature, which we're not doing a good job of right now. And this is everything you've been talking about. But it's beautiful because the modern science gives us, it's not metaphysics, oh, this is a nice idea. No, this is physics. This is science. And it says, you want to, thrive into the future? Well, then the things you've been teaching us are the programs and the rules that we must be looking at and start to incorporate in our lives. So I really want to say thank you, because you dedicated your life to helping us do that. And I thank you very much, Ervin.
One of the key contributors to the new renaissance that we look for is Bruce Lipton.
Thank you, my dear friend. Thank you so much.